Hello everyone, Anderson here, and I welcome you to Kiltan Rats Plays Ironsworn Chapter 2, Episode 10. There is a storm raging outside, so if you hear something in the background that adds a bit of atmosphere, that is just nature guest starring in today's episode. Thematically somewhat appropriate because it seems like we're going for a bit of a hike. Kynan finds himself in a bind, having lost all trace of Asha and Saskia as they disapparated through the Star Chamber, the primordial piece of magical technology. And having thought things through a bit from Kynan's perspective as someone who had some dealings with this kind of thing before, he would probably do something now that he's lost any sort of trackable trace of his quarry that other Ironlanders might not do due to prejudice, superstition and whatnot, and that is to actually go and seek out the firstborn, the elves, who play a bit of a starring role in all this mess and haven't really shown themselves yet. So Kynan decides, lacking other options, to go and investigate. I say lacking other options, of course there would have been other ways to deal with this, but given the fictional framing and Kynan's background, overall his ties to the firstborn Hulata, one of his bonds, who also hasn't made an appearance yet, it made sense to me to have him seek out the elves. And that brings us to a video I released a few days ago about the elves, because we didn't really have much of an idea what they were like. I had a few ground rules I wanted to furnish them with. I wanted them to be quite alien, immortal, yet with a kind of not so problematic immortality and things like that. So there's a whole video about this, which also incidentally provided us with details of Arsula the Forsaken, who happens to be Asha's father. So if you want to go ahead and watch that, that will be linked somewhere here. If you don't want to go ahead and watch that, that's probably fine, because I will do my best to have these bits and pieces appear in the fiction as we go along as well. Basically what I'm trying to say is you don't really have to watch that video to understand what's happening going forward, but it will contain a lot of the reasoning behind it, a lot of background information. I would of course appreciate it if you went and watched that, just as I would appreciate it if you left a like, a comment and subscribe, because the algorithm and things and YouTube and whatnot, and ring the bell of awakening chosen undead. I think that's how it goes. Anyway, let's carry on and jump into the episode. The sky is still dark over Redcrest, with the first grey of dawn creeping over the horizon as Kynan sits alone for the moment in Morgan's house by the fire pit with a low fire burning in front of him. He's preparing his backpack, making sure that nothing in there rattles and makes a sound, as he is a sneaky one. He's an infiltrator. And I think at this point it would make sense for him to, using that time, that hour or two that he takes after the battle, to tend to his cuts and bruises and wounds, to heal up and to also take some time to resupply. We think maybe we can take the liberty, because he is sort of on good terms with Morgan. He's got the run of the place. Morgan has tasked him with a vow. We'll come to that later. So I think we can condense that into one brief catching his breath moment before he has to set out in pursuit. Well, technically not in pursuit, because he doesn't know where they are, but in the process of trying to discover where Asha and Saskia went. So we make a heal move, we make a sojourn move to fill up our health, our supply, and see where that puts us. When you treat an injury or ailment, roll plus wits. If you're mending your own wounds, roll plus wits or plus iron, whichever is lower. We have lower wits, so we roll that. We roll well. We roll a strong hit. Our care is helpful, so we can give ourselves 2 health, which puts us back to +5. And now we are going to start raiding the pantry of good old Morgan to not resupply, to sojourn actually, because we are in a settlement. We aren't scavenging, and We also share a bond, not with the settlement, but with one of the big players in the settlement. So I think for the purpose of this roll, by what the fiction suggests, it makes sense to take that +1. That is a 6 plus, what is it, hearth? That is 2. That is, oh, that actually puts the +1 in a very useful spot, because that puts us over from weak to strong hit. What does that mean? On a hit, you and your allies may choose 2 from within the categories below. We can actually also take +2 spirit as we consort. Well, we're alone at the moment, so I think what that puts in the fiction is that Morgan shows up for a final little powwow, just as Kynan is finishing up taking some salted meats and some dried crackers and other assorted sundries out of his storage pantry and stuffs them in his pack. Takes a bow from the corner of the room where, like, Morgan's one of Morgan's hunting bows. I'm sure he's got a couple, because we lost our bow in the last session. And Kynan sits down again in front of the fire, takes a last breather, and the fire starts flickering as the wind from outside catches it, and Morgan slips in, coming from the... Well, I suppose he probably was in the village hall giving a report to the Jarl or to the council here, to the elders, and probably also had to cover for Kynan here a bit. So he'll likely share in Kynan's company for a while and maybe wind him up a little on all the things he's done here so far, the shady things like bringing in a companion and springing a prisoner and all that good stuff, and letting the refugees in. Not that that was a terrible thing to do, which then puts the spirit up as well. And before he parts, Kynan has the opportunity to ask some final questions. The elves around here, you've had dealings with them? Not too many, dear boy. They keep themselves to themselves, and that's just how we like them. Up until recently, they've respected that unspoken demarcation line past the last of our lumber camps, and contact was few and far between, rarely hostile. They'd kick us out every now and again, but something like this, if they're behind this, I don't know what's gotten into them. So that's where I go, that lumber camp. Makes sense to me. Stray too far from there and you'll run into the first outskirts of the woods that aren't quite so friendly. We've lost a few foolish younger ones over the years to this, but that was always incursions that were quite individual and apparently easily forgiven by the firstborn. They wound up dead. Oh no, they don't kill easy. They have a thing about that, it seems. They came back delirious, hallucinating. Not sure what they did to them, but they definitely scrambled their minds. Looking forward to it. You'll be fine. You're not coming then? Can't easily get out of here, dear boy. Plus, I'll have to run some interference for you. Make sure that Bevis keeps his mouth shut about certain things. I'll take my leave then. And I think Morgan and 2 of the guard of Redcrest still accompany him out of town and to the pier, so they can row him upriver a bit and to the other side of that separating water stream that he had to ford. So I think Morgan is kind enough to just make sure he gets across there and with dry boots. And in that early morning light, that grey light with a tint of orange rising in the distant horizon, the fog hanging thick in those massive primordial trees with all those ferns in the undergrowth, the premise of entering in there looks quite daunting to Kynan, but more on a yes, been there, done that sort of level. He steels himself, he somewhat knows what to expect, and he is, even to some degree, I think he's quite happy to be doing this alone. He's, in the past few weeks, he had a lot of company for a loner like him, but it also cost him his preferred way of doing his work. So he's an infiltrator, he's an archer, he likes to get the drop on his enemies. He is connected to Siora, who has been relatively quiet through all this because there is always somebody around, and to some extent that probably makes it more difficult for Siora to appear out of her spirit realm. So I think Kynan actually, for the first couple of minutes of walking in that fresh early morning air with the smell of pine needles and just the overall forest perfume, he kind of enjoys it. Now, mechanically speaking, that puts us at a point where we have a few options how to resolve this quest for elves. And I initially considered maybe I want to do this as a delve and just have the objectives of the delve be to find the elves and have some of the denizens be elves, and then if Kynan encounters some, then we can see what the oracles say, whether this is somebody who's willing to talk to him. But that seems a bit premature, I would say, because there is this looming threat of Ursula, who we already know is imprisoned in this barrow somewhere in a taboo, in a cursed part of the forest, as we established in our world building video. And there is, to me, every chance that this is where Kynan has to go to resolve this entire issue, this trouble. And this is probably also where, more likely than not, Asha is headed. It just makes sense that she would go and seek out her father, and through the means of this escape route has gotten quite a head start. So I don't really want to do a delve to then do a delve. I think I'm gonna take a page out of the me, myself, and die approach of doing a short travel and just roll one Undertaker journey roll to have a representation of Kynan's traversal of this outer edge of the deep wilds up until that first lumber camp, and then from there on out resolve it through gathering information rolls, because we are searching an area, and then through the oracles determine what we find and what complications arise. And then if we do get an elf into our sights, and if they are willing to talk to us and share, then maybe we can find our way into a delve and do this whole Ursula's barrow expedition. That sounds like more of a plan. So I am going to do that one-shot Undertake a journey roll just as a qualitative idea of what waypoint lies in between us and this farthest lumber camp that Morgan was talking about. Before we do that, I need to dial it back one, because there might be something still in our way before that, because I, at the end of last session, swore an iron vow, so I actually also need to do that in the mechanics. That almost slipped my mind just now. I should put that on a note for the beginning of this session, but then either it's the Highland Park's fault or I'm just getting old, but I forgot. So let us see about swearing an iron vow. We share a bond, we get that +1, we do it with heart, so we get a +3, and what do we get? Very nice. Okay, that's a strong hit. We are emboldened, and we take +2 momentum. Very nice. So +5 momentum up from +3. So as Kynan thinks back on him pledging himself to Morgan as he walks through that forest, he has that scene playing back in his mind, and he feels emboldened by it. He also feels somewhat conflicted about it, because he does at the moment not really see a good way how to reconcile the vow to Aaron and the vow to Morgan. But of course, when in doubt, I think Kynan does have some understanding of loyalty, and he will err on the side of Morgan for this one, unless Asha can be really convincing, or in turn Kynan can be really convincing and somehow make Asha see that finding her and keeping her safe and getting a trouble in Redcrest resolves somehow align. Most notably, the save Redcrest from trouble does not necessarily imply bring the guilty party back, just make it stop. So maybe also we can, if it comes to that, deflect blame to Ursula. We'll see. It really depends on Asha's willingness to cooperate. And if we look at her persona that we generated, she is definitely angry. So there will have to be some way of convincing her that there is some way she needs to find to get past that anger. That's way off though. For now, Kynan is on a stroll through the woods, well, more of a crouched crawl really, as he sets his feet quite gently on this somewhat bouncy forest floor strewn with needles, and making it quite easy for him to move noiselessly, especially as he's alone now. And we check in with the Undertake a Journey move to see how he's doing. It's a wits roll, so we are on a weak hit, which does mean we progress without a perilous event and without paying the price, but we do lose one supply. Perhaps Kynan has to cut his way through a thick bramble, and he's got that hatchet with him still from the ruins of Stone Ridge, and it finally gives out and breaks, and he casts it away, and well, that's that memento from Stone Ridge gone. But overall he's on a good track, and he does however encounter a waypoint, so I think we might want to generate that. Let us head to the respective oracle. We do know we're in the woods, we do know we're in the deep wilds in the outer edges, so we, I think, only need a location descriptor here. 93 dens, so we have reached the part of the deep wilds where the trees move closer together, the taller trees get higher, the sun that is now up in the sky gets blocked out by the canopy. Is there anything interesting here? Let's maybe check in with some locationally aspect and focus oracle to see what this dense part of the woods holds for us. That's a 94 abandoned and a 78 information. Abandoned information. What are we finding here now? Okay, in a dense part of the woods, this is where few Ironlanders tread. So is it likely to be information left behind by an Ironlander? I don't think so. We can ask the oracle. So 26 plus, it's not. 29, so no, this is not something an Ironlander left behind, or an information piece that is relating to an Ironlander. So are we getting a first clue in regards to our elves, or what are we getting here? I think what we have here is Kynan pushing through the thick branches in his way and reaching a small clearing, on the far side of which is a hollow between the trees, clearly cut by the lumber workers of Redcrest. So Kynan knows he's fairly close to the lumber camp that he's seeking. He's almost there, and he comes across a series of freshly dug graves that then have been left and abandoned as the lumber workers retreated. And this piece of information that Kynan gets from it is that these grave markers, these stone boulders that the Redcrestians have erected over the mounds of earth, and these patted down mounds of earth that are covered in rocks in a crude outline. These boulders, where the names of the deceased, 3 of them have been scratched in, are covered in the same smear, this blood-like, almost hand-painted runic, very crude runic script that Kynan also found in the old village, and which he, I think, in his mind, more likely than not relates to the firstborn. He looks at this and thinks, this is not something an Ironlander left. So what it tells him is that the firstborn were here after the Ironlanders left. So there are maybe some close by. So he gets his hopes up a little. And he gingerly steps over the graves to get to that hollow, that little path, and follows it. And it leads him to an area where tree stumps line the outside of an artificially created large clearing, which is quite densely packed with log cabins and some utilities like a fire pit and a larger sort of common hall with a stone foundation that they made out of the variously shaped boulders that they find in the forest. He hears a sound of water nearby as a burbling stream is somewhere in the vicinity, which lines up with the river near Redcrest, which is how they get the trees to their final destination. And the whole place looks abandoned, and also looks abandoned and rushed. The doors aren't closed of the cabins, and there are some pieces of clothing still hanging to dry, left to their slow decay in the elements of the forest. And it's eerily quiet. And just as with the gravestones, Kynan sees these smears, these large runes, these convoluted yet fairly simple scrawlings on the walls of the cabins and on the floor and everywhere, and also some totems or fetishes hung up on roof beams, and one hanging from the crossbeam of the well, similar shapes as the ones that they smeared over the walls, made from animal bone and wooden twigs and feathers. And the whole thing has quite a somber atmosphere to Kynan as he steps there, and he sniffs the air, trying to catch a whiff of any scent of decay of a body somewhere left to lie and rot, but that doesn't seem to have been the case. They seem to have had enough time to bury the ones that succumbed early, that they probably had to tragically subdue somehow when they went crazy. And I think that is where we can gather information for the first time to see if there's anything immediately here that helps us pick up on a trace of the elves. And we are starting out with a miss. That is unfortunate. On a miss, your investigation unearths a dire threat or reveals an unwelcome truth that undermines your quest. What could that be? The thing is, it has gotten so complicated and convoluted already with things being stacked on top of each other. I can't really think of much of another unwelcome truth that could come to light and somehow complicate our quest here. I think I'm gonna action and theme this one to see if I get an idea. Otherwise we'll look at the threat angle, or maybe this will reveal a threat angle instead. So 38 share. What are we sharing? 55. Let me just check again. Is that really a 50? Yes, that's really a 55. 55 is disease. So share disease. Well, that puts a bit of a damper on things. That probably means Kynan caught it too. How would his investigation uncover? Oh, I think I know how his investigation uncovers this. So he's in the lumber camp. He's walking around. He's approaching the lumber cabins, the log cabins. He goes up to these dangling dreamcatcher like warding signs, and he reaches for one, and it hurts to touch. And at the same time he's got this flash before his eyes, and he's getting a very sort of boiling rage welling up in him for just a very brief moment before he subsides again. And as he wipes the cold sweat from his brow, he touches these cuts that the attacking birds left behind, and he looks at the dream catcher ward again, and he says, fuck. Because you just can't be a stoic, grimdark protagonist without saying that every once in a while. Anyway, so he's infected. Oh joy. It probably gives him a bit of an incentive to now pursue these vows. If he was lacking motivation, now he has it. But also, I wonder about the time frame here. He just got that first day of infection now, I think. So he's still several days out from fully breaking out, but it definitely doesn't make things easier. And maybe the elves, once he finds them, also pick up on it. Is that enough of a price to pay? I think that's enough of a price to pay. We didn't roll a negative match, so I think that's enough for that particular revelation. So let's pursue some further information gathering here. That looks to be a bit more successful. We roll plus wits. That puts us at a strong hit, which we discover something helpful and specific. The path you must follow or action you must take to make progress is made clear. Envision what you learn and take +2 momentum up to +7. I just had a quick look to confirm something about gaunts, which is what the elves ride in this part of the world. And I think that's maybe what we find. We find gaunt tracks in the forest floor leading away from the village, because the elves weren't trying to be subtle. If they want there not to be a trace, there will not be a trace, but in this case they figured, well, the humans have already gone, and anyway we're receding back to our own territory, so what's the harm in riding there? So Kynan now finds a gaunt track to follow. A gaunt being these horse-like, emaciated, skeletal, nightmarish, slightly reptilian-skinned creatures that the elves tame and breed and ride on. So he follows that track, and does that lead him to elves right away? Seems a bit too easy almost. Maybe we'll call it unlikely, 76 or greater. He runs into them right away. No such luck. He will run into them, I think, as part of pursuing the gaunt track, but it's quite a ways away. They don't inhabit the immediate neighborhood of the lumber camp. There's a bit of a no man's land area that is uninhabited, which the gaunt track leads through, and uninhabited doesn't mean not dangerous, so I think we'll just do one more waypoint, undertake a journey before we get to our, well, wherever it is these elves hang out. I think we'll also leave that up to the oracles. So let's undertake one more journey move here. That looks to be another weak hit. That puts us down one more supply. I think in this case maybe we lose a rope, as we have to rappel down a sheer drop in the forest floor down into a gorge, and Kynan idly wonders how the elves made it down there with their eerie, uncanny mounts, but I think maybe gaunts are, especially since they have to navigate these forests, blessed with the gene of the Skyrim horse, so they can like go down very steep inclines, almost supernaturally so. And Kynan himself, he has to tie around a rope around a tree and rappel down, and it catches somewhere as he tries to get the knot to budge, and he gives up disgustedly and just keeps walking. But is there something down in that gorge? Is there a particular encounter or something? Can we do action and theme again, or should we do the delve oracles maybe? I think for fleshing out locations, those are always a bit nicer. Since we've already decided it's a gorge, I don't think we need to really roll the location oracle, but let's give us an aspect and focus here just to see whether there's something interesting to discover or whether we just pass through it. 65 hidden, 42 prisoner. Hidden prisoner? What are we running into now? Maybe this is already the outskirts of where the elves start to consider this their territory, and this place is trapped. And whoever this prisoner is somebody who fell into a trap that the elves set up, and they haven't really been back to check yet. Definitely not an elf then, if we go with that one. And I think we do. Before we determine the exact nature of the descent of this person, because I think it has to be a person. Prisoner implies sentience, I think. It's debatable, but I will read the prisoner as that it's a sentient creature. So let us give it a roll in its respective society. Maybe that tells us something. 50, a forager. Right. Do we have anything in the catalog of peoples or creatures that would maybe pass for a forager? Oh, it's hidden. That might give us a clue. As Kynan creeps along the depression, the gorge in the deepening forest, he almost doesn't notice a hint of movement above him, a few paces farther. He's got his eyes quite firmly set on the path that the elves, the mounted patrol that he's following, took. And so it's only by pure chance that maybe a shift in the shadow and light makes him raise his eyes, and he sees that about an arm's length above his eye level there is the well camouflaged dangling form of a troll. It looks to be almost dead. It's moving very weakly. The movement that kind of caught was more a spasm, otherwise he might not even have noticed it, because the troll itself is very well adapted to this forest area, and it just blends in. It has a usually translucent adaptive skin that merges with whatever color scheme its environment has, so it's very earth colored, very forest toned overall. And as Kynan zooms in on the scene, he can also see a dash of red dripping down from where it's hanging, and he sees that it's hanging half, one arm half over a large, thick, thorny vine, and the other one hanging under, and the thorns of the vine are strangling it and very slowly pulling at it, but the troll is somehow caught on something, so the vines, the contractions don't really get it to move up to or where the rest of the thorny brambles are. And Kynan looks up and sees this looming wall of thorns and brambles on either side of the gorge now, and he knows, oh, this is bloodthorn. This is rumored to be a sentient sort of plant that feasts on blood, and that is supposedly to be found wherever the elves inhabit their settlements. And it seems to have snagged itself a troll, but it can't quite get him all the way up to its central pod and suck him dry. And contrary to his experience with the infected trolls, Kynan also knows that trolls in general aren't really aggressive, and they're quite docile creatures if they're not cornered, or, you know, they are not the most violent unless you force them to. And as he looks up there, the semi-conscious troll, its face becoming a bit more distinct in that interplay of light and shadow, the multiple eyes shimmering down at him, and the creature whimpering in a guttural way, kind of grimaces and not really sure what to do here. He's not much of a savior, but this is somehow offensive to him. He considers it for a moment and reaches down to his quiver, pulls out an arrow, and shoots the troll through the eye, and it goes limp, and it unclasps its hand, and to Kynan's feet a very striking looking multicolored blossom falls, which is probably what made the troll climb up there and try to get it, because trolls in general would probably know what a bloodthorn is, but they are also crazy about collecting shiny things, and so the troll just couldn't resist it. And I guess Kynan figures, well, if it was worth the life of a troll to get this bloom, maybe I'll just grab it and put it in my pack and continue on my merry way. And that's our hidden prisoner dealt with in a morally ambiguous way, I guess. And that leaves us very close to where the elves are and relatively out of time to deal with whatever's next. So we're sure to meet the elves, but we're sure to meet them next time. So I thank you very much for watching. I catch you next time, and bye for now.